Alright pilots, welcome back. Nick's for another video here. We're going to do the taxi, takeoff, flight, and landing of our Hornet now. So hopefully you already did your cold start. You know how to get everything up and running and aligned properly in your Hornet. So now we're going to worry about taxiing up to the runway, taking off, flying around, and landing. We are not going to do everything by the book. It's not going to be procedural, as in doing an exact landing pattern or an overhead brake or anything of the sort. I'm just going to show you how to take off properly, fly around a little bit to feel the flight model, and then how to land and land well. That way you don't wreck your plane or have any troubles or anxieties trying to land your plane. It's actually quite easy in the Hornet. It's very fly-by-wire, so let's get right to it. First off, for a few bindings, just to get you ready, you'll want to go to your axes if you have a HOTAS to get your pitch roll, your rudder, if you have pedals or if you have an axis for that, your two throttles, left and right, and of course while you're here you can get your slew button. That way you have that for a later time. If you don't have a HOTAS, you can go into flight controls here and you can find all your aircraft left-right banking, pitching up and down. So that would be your stick axes. You can do that with 4 keybinds. Your rudder left and right, and your throttles. And of course a trimmer switch is always good. You'll want to have to have your trimmer switch bound. You're going to need it when we're coming in for our landing. I'm going to show you how to do an on-speed Hornet landing, and you'll want to trim for that to make it nice and easy. And let's just zoom out to all of the controls now for all the other stuff you're probably going to need. Wheel brake. You're going to want your flaps. I use a 3-position switch, so up, all the way up is the auto flaps, in the middle is the half flaps, and all the way down is full flaps. And just for flying around, that's pretty much all you're going to need. Well, no, see, I almost made a mistake there. You also need your landing gear. Bringing your gear up and down, being very, very important. Alright, to taxi. Oh, there's another bind. I always forget the binding, so there's your undesignate button, is also your nose wheel steering button. So if you're on the ground and you have your nose wheel steering button, that turns your nose wheel steering on. If you hold it down, it'll go into high mode, which allows you to turn very tight. It's basically 90-degree nose wheel steering, and that's because it's made to be piloted from an aircraft carrier where you need a 0 turn radius to maneuver around the deck. So just turning it on will give you the symbol up here, nose wheel steering, and if you hold it down, it'll say high. We'll jump onto the outside. So here's your nose wheel steering. This is the regular. And now we're going to hold down the high, and there you go. That's with the high held down. The nose wheel steering button held down is going to give you a higher turn radius. Just remember, you don't want to be moving forward very much, if at all, when you hold down for your high. You could break the gear. You're probably just going to skid it. In reality, you would probably damage it, especially the rubber. The other button for your nose wheel steering that you're going to want is also a multi-purpose button, and that's this one right here called autopilot, nose wheel steering disengage, and paddle. So when you start getting into the flight model later on in more advanced lessons, you're going to hear about paddling. So that's this switch. It's also the nose wheel steering disengage and also the autopilot disengage. So we'll get back into the plane here, and I'm going to hit the paddle switch, and you'll notice the nose wheel steering has now been completely disengaged, and now your rudder no longer moves your front tire at all. So that's for when you start taking off and you're up to speed. Once you get about 70 knots, your rudders will actually be able to keep you lined up. You'll have enough air speed, even on the ground, for your rudders to actually be useful. That's when you'll turn your nose wheel steering off, because you don't want to use your rudders too much when you first start taking off, because it can be dangerous to be moving forward at speeds and having your nose wheel start turning. Alright, so we're going to turn our nose wheel steering back on by just hitting our nose wheel steering button, our disengage, or I'm sorry, our nose wheel steering button, which, like I said, just Just so we know, it's the undesignate button, so you're going to use that a lot when you're using weapons and radars. So when you'll use the undesignate when you're up in the sky. And on the ground, it's just your nose wheel steering. Alright, so normally we'd have our parking brake on, so as soon as we're ready to taxi, we've already gotten all started up. We're going to release the emergency brake. We're going to come over here. We've got our loadout now. So we'd want to look right here on our FCS page. So it's on our SUP page. You can always cycle through the TAC and the SUP on your menu. FCS, and then you'll want to move your controls. It's going to go through your ailerons, rudders, and you want to make sure there's no X's in any of these boxes. If there's an X in the box, then you need to reset and redo your FCS, which we'll do that right here to show you. Every time you change your loadout, every time you lounge, you're going to take off again. You want to reset this just to be sure, and you want to make sure there's no X's in those boxes. So we hold down the reset for a few seconds, let go, hold down the takeoff trim, and let go. And that is because the dampeners, the FCS system, are basically going to take the plane off for us. When we get to the runway and we start taking off, you don't use the stick. Your hands are completely off the stick. Your hand is right up here on this handle right here. Alright, so here we go. We're going to taxi out. Our FCS is all checked up. We don't have any boxes or X's in our boxes. I'm going to go ahead and get over here and turn my radar on, which is what I usually do when I'm going to take off. I'll turn my radar on. We're not going to use the radar this time, but it's just something I do. Alright, so emergency brake is off. We're going to just introduce a little bit of throttle here. And then we're going to let the throttle back a little bit. And we're just going to use our pedals to steer the plane. We're not going to need the high steering. And again, if you're going to use high steering, you need to slow way down or even stop. But if you're just driving, then you just need to use your pedals and nothing else. So we're just going to go to the runway and we're going to get lined up. I'm going to go through the procedure for taking off. And like I said, the FCS takes off for you. You don't pull back on the stick. You don't pull forward on the stick. You don't roll left or right. You literally just use your feet on your pedals to keep the plane lined up straight as you're accelerating down the runway. The FCS is literally going to take the plane off, and then you're going to grab a hold of your controls once you're in the air. And this is how you take off a Hornet. So depending on your loadout, you might want to go full burner just to have a good acceleration and get off the runway a little quicker. If you don't mind waiting a little bit, you can just go to mill power. And either way, even if you go full throttle or you go mill power, you let the plane take itself off. Once you get off, once you get wheels up, which you'll notice your AOA indexer will light up as soon as you have weight off wheels. You immediately want to hit your landing gear to bring your landing gear up. And also with your FCS reset, you take off with your flaps in the half position. So not full and not auto. It has to be in half for your FCS to take off properly. If you try to take off a Hornet and your FCS is set but your flaps are not, it's going to try to throw you up about straight up in the air 90 degrees. And you're probably going to stall out and come down crashing into the ground. So set your FCS properly. Flaps to half, you're good to go. We're going to put our feet on the brakes. One other thing before we get going, once you get up to 70 knots, by the way, you can hit your paddle switch, your autopilot disengage paddle switch, and it will turn your nose wheel steering off. That way you don't have to worry about overcorrecting with your pedals too much. At 70 knots, you're good to go. You can give it a little bit more rudder without the risk of, yanking to the left or right really hard. So our brakes are on. We're going to start throttling up a little bit. We're going to get up to about low power here. We're going to let off the brakes and we're going to throttle up. I'm not going to go max afterburner. I don't need to. Now I'm just using my pedals. Now I'm going to turn the nose wheel steering off. I still haven't even touched the stick. I'm going to let the plane take off all by itself. At about 160 to 70 knots. We're a little light. It might be a little quicker. It's going to be quicker because we're so light. But there you go. Now I hit the gear. It's coming up. Full flaps, or flaps go into auto. And now I'm going to grab a hold of the stick. Now we're flying. And now I have full control of the plane. And I'm just going to maintain 5 degrees up so I can gain some speed. I still haven't hit the burner. And you'll also notice that the Hornet is a pretty big plane, and it's not the fastest plane in the world. It does have power, but she's kind of big. She's fairly slow compared to a lot of the other planes. So you can see we're still barely even getting up to 300 knots, and we're barely doing 6-7 degrees up. So when you want to fly around a Hornet, you definitely have the urge to fly around in burner a lot because you are kind of slow because you're such a big, heavy plane. I recommend not going into burner all the time unless you need to, because she's also not the best on fuel. You really need to pay attention to your fuel gauge, which is down here. And you can set your own bingo by just using these 2 arrows down here. So depending on how far away I'm going to be from an airfield, I'll usually set my bingo to somewhere around 3,500 pounds or 3,000 pounds. Alright, so now we're up to 360 knots. We're going to start to make a left turn leg around here. The flight model is pretty simple. It's a very stable flight model due because the FCS and the dampening system is so good. It is very fly-by-wire. So I'm not using any rudder now. My rudder's been neutral ever since I got off the runway. Now I'm just rolling. And then I'm also pulling back on the stick to try to maintain that level flight while I'm turning. And of course, when you pull back on the stick, when you're at an angle like this, it's also going to make you turn tighter. So you're just balancing the pressure backwards on the stick with the roll to make a nice coordinated turn without gaining altitude or losing altitude or pulling too many G's. Now, I'm not going to get into advanced maneuvering right now with the Hornet. I just want you to fly around and get the feel of her. Make some nice turns. You can roll pretty snappy if you want to. Get the feel of it. We can pull back pretty hard. The Hornet has an amazing nose authority, so you can really maneuver this plane well. And once you get into the paddle switch, you'll really be able to whip the nose around once you start learning how to low speed and high G maneuver. But just for now, fly around, get used to it. You can go ahead and kick up the burner if you want to and start feeling the acceleration. And you'll notice that it does accelerate a lot more with burner, but it's still noticeably slower than maybe what you've seen or are used to. But there you go. We're already getting up to 550 knots. We're moving pretty quick. So let's effectuate a landing. So there's the runway that we came from. We're going to swoop on around here. And I'm not going to worry about the altitude I'm at. I'm just going to be about here. I'm not going to get really high or really low. We're just going to turn in and line it to the runway. And once we're lined up with the runway, I'm going to set up for on speed. And if you don't know what on speed is, I do have a video about on speed, and I recommend everybody to watch that video to really learn about that part of aviation, because it's extremely important for a lot of maneuvering theory, and mainly for landing aircraft. Once you understand on speed, landing is going to be so much easier for you, so I suggest you learn it. So I'm going to start throttling back to idle now. And I'm not going to bring the gear out or the flaps down until I'm at about 250 knots in the Hornet. So until then, we're just idle and we're slowly coming around. We're spotting the runway. We're just going to keep slowly coming around and letting our speed bleed off. I'm not worried about my altitude unless I'm very high. If I was way up there, I'd bring my altitude down more, but this is fine where we are. There are actual specs for glide slope and what you want your angle to, when you're set up on on-speed AOA, you know, how high you should be, but we're just going to cheat that a little bit. Like I said, I'm not going to get into the weeds with you on all those specs and numbers. We're just going to teach you how it's done, and then you can go from there. All right, we're really light, so even at idle, we're still doing 280 knots. So to slow ourselves down a little bit, what I'm going to do is go full flaps and bring the gear down a little early. Because gear down, flaps down creates a lot of drag, so it'll help you slow down even more. All right. So just a quick rundown. I'm going to pause this here. So here is our flight vector. This is our velocity vector, so this is where we're going to be. This is where we're going. This is our E bracket, so this is our AOA gauge. basically you're going to want to get your velocity vector inside this bracket, and that's going to make sure that you are at the correct angle of attack while you're gliding down on the air. This is your indexer. So when your velocity vector is inside this E bracket, it is going to show the donut is going to be lit up, and depending on your speed, the top and bottom indexers will be lit up. So if the bottom indexer is lit, you're going faster than you need to be for being on speed in these current air, wind, and weather conditions. If the top hash is lit, then that means you're going too slow. And again, the donut means that you are in the correct AOA angle to be on slope. Now, the trick to this is once you're all set up on speed, then you want to get your velocity vector onto the front of the runway where you want to land. And then you're going to use your throttle to maintain that. So if you start sliding below the runway, you're going to increase your throttle a little bit. If you start getting high, you're going to decrease your throttle. When you're flying a jet, you don't just set your throttle to one speed and it stays there. You're going to be rocking the throttle back and forth quite a bit when you're landing, when you're doing any kind of formation flying, air-to-air refueling. So get used to using your throttle quite a bit to effectuate where your velocity vector is, because that's how you do it. So we're going to come around, we're going to get lined up. I'm going to keep slowing down, and at the same time I'm going to be using my trim hat to trim back, which is going to slowly bring the nose up, because I want to use trim to get my velocity vector right in here. The whole trick is going to be, once I'm all set up on speed, I'm no longer going to use the stick, kind of like when we took off, except for roll. So if I'm drifting left or right, I might roll left or right to make sure I stay back on course straight to the runway. But I'm not going to pull back or push forward on the stick at all, because I'm trimmed into AOA. Once I'm trimmed into AOA, I'm just going to use the throttle to change my velocity vector. Now, normally you'd come around at a certain altitude to hit the glide slope properly, and then you're going to just maintain your proper on speed, which doesn't mean how fast you're going. It just means you're all set up. You're not going fast, you're not going slow, you're in the donut, you're in your AOA. That's on speed. So whatever speed you're doing when all that is set up, that's what speed you're going to be up for on speed. Don't worry about how fast you're going. On speed doesn't mean air speed. You know, if the wind is right in your face really strong, you're going to have a different air speed than what you normally would. So there's a lot of factors that you don't need to worry about. You just need to get set up. So I'm going to describe this as we're going. I'm going to unpause. So right now I'm hitting back on my trim hat slowly. I'm not hammering it. I'm just doing a couple clicks here and there. Slowly working that nose up into position. And I'm waiting for the Hornet to bounce, because with the flaps all the way down and the gear down, once you get down to a certain speed, the nose is going to try to jump way up. So I'm trying to wait for that to happen. There it goes. So it's shooting way up now. Now I'm going to push forward on the stick just a little bit. And it'll settle down, and now we're at about 150 knots. Now it's all going to start settling down. So I even trimmed up a little too high there probably. But there we go. Now we're about trimmed in, right? So now I'm going to get back on the gas and bring my velocity vector back up. You can see we got a solid donut. We're not going too fast and too slow right now. I'm going to trim it up one more time and kind of get right into the middle there. So I'm a little high for my approach, so I'm a little higher than the glide slope. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let my velocity vector be a little below the runway here. And I'm going to keep rocking my throttle backwards a little bit more to try to keep the velocity vector a little low, and that's going to allow me to drop altitude a little quicker so that I'm not so high. See, when you're on speed, if you're way higher than the runway, even though your velocity vector is set on the runway where you want to land, you're going to be coming in a lot steeper, if that makes sense. So I'm letting myself get below glide slope, that way I can come in a little bit flatter so I'm not so high. And I don't have to worry about starting at the correct altitude or any of that. I just use my eyeballs. Now I'm pretty good, so now I'm just going to use my throttle. I'm not using the stick. I am just using the throttle, rocking it back and forth. When I get close to the runway, I'm going to give it a little extra gas to flatten out a little bit more. Then I'm going to flare just a little bit with the stick, and then I'm going to go to idle on the throttle. Now we're idle, and we're just going to let it sink down nice and soft. So that is on-speed landing. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot of more complicated things you can go through with that. But just to get started, that's how you can on-speed land. If you're really high, let it drift down a little bit until you get down to a much lower altitude. And then use your throttle to get your velocity vector to come back up onto the runway. And then just use your throttle to maintain that. Rock it back and forth. You're gonna oscillate up and down a little bit with your velocity vector, but just keep it there at the front of the runway. Give it a little extra gas near the end. Go to idle. Maybe give it a little bit of backstick now once you're right above the runway, and just let it naturally come right down. Piece of cake. You're gonna find it nice and easy to do this with the Hornet. For the most part, you should probably never wreck your Hornet once you've done it a few times. It's not that hard, and it's really easily repeatable with the Hornet. The symbology is really good. The controls are really snappy. It handles on-speed really well because it is an extremely modern Navy jet. And you learn on-speed because that's the way all Navy jets land, because they're made to be fielded and landed on aircraft carriers. So landing on an aircraft carrier is a little bit different than what I just did, but it's also the same. So it's an on-speed landing. The only difference is there's no throttle change at the end with a little flare or anything like that. You just set up on speed at the correct altitude when you start, and then you'll have the ball when you're coming in to gauge whether you're a little higher or below a glide slope, and you basically just fly it into the ground. The ground being the deck of the aircraft carrier, where there's 4 cables. So that's a scary proposition, but believe it or not, once you're really good at on-speed landings, it's actually not going to be that bad. You'll do just fine. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you get in your Hornet and start taking off and doing some circuits and landing real soon. I know you're going to enjoy it. Hopefully soon we'll start getting into some videos about weapon systems with the Hornet. And isn't that going to be fun? But you always got to start from cold starts and flight models and landings. I will see you all later, pilots.